Okay, we are now live on YouTube for anyone who wants to watch. So as they always say on TV or Big Brother or whatever, you are live, so please don't swear. Okay, so the second meeting that we've held in this way, second informal meeting, because we're not allowed to hold formal meetings under on remotely at the moment as the regulations change. And I'm hoping that by next month we will be back in a position to meet again in the hall, because with COVID numbers now falling, hopefully we can get to that situation. I do know that East Hampshire, we are having a meeting tomorrow evening where we will be in the room, and we have a full council meeting on Thursday evening where we will be in the room, but we are staying socially distanced with masks and so on. So I'm hopeful that we as a parish council can return to having our normal meetings next month, because I know that there is demand for having the meetings in the room, quite understandably. So hopefully this is the last meeting in this current outbreak that we will have to hold this way. But I make no apology for holding it this way, because myself and Sarah have to consider the health and safety of everyone, and our considered view was excuse me, was that this at the moment is the safest option, because I'm sure none of us would want someone to go down with COVID because of attending the parish council meeting. Okay, so do we have any apologies, Sarah?
No, we have no apologies.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. And declaration of interest, I'm sure you all know by now, if anybody has a pecuniary interest, please declare it when we get to that item. And hopefully I can shift this frog in my throat. In terms of chair's announcements, I have just one really, which is that from February the 12th until February the 18th, there will be no trains in either direction from Petersfield to Havant. It's the first stage of the re-signalling and work on the level crossings between Farncombe and Havant. And we can expect several periods of work like this between now and the spring of 2024, when it should all be completed and we should all start to see the benefits. But in this first phase, we certainly won't see any benefits. It's very much hidden amongst what the railways are doing, but it will mean that there are no passenger trains. But I would remind people, if they're crossing the line via one of the foot crossings that we have, that there will still be engineering trains operating in both directions. So please do still look out for trains, because just because there's no passengers doesn't mean there's no trains. And the other thing, the trains will be replaced by a replacement bus service, which will run twice an hour in each direction. So journey times will take longer because the buses will stop at all stations. And when you get to Petersfield, you'll have a choice between staying on the bus you're on to Havant, which will also stop at Rowlands Castle, or getting off and getting on a faster bus, which actually goes straight to Portsmouth. So you have a choice. What I'm still waiting confirmation from Network Rail and South Western Railway on is what the situation will be regarding disabled people or people who have children in pushchairs and so on, because the bus company have already said they will not take wheelchairs and pushchairs on their coaches that they're using for the replacement bus service. And so we need to find out what is going to happen for those. So as soon as I know, I will circulate a note round to everyone so that we know, in case any parishioners ask you what's happening. But there will be provision. I just don't know what that provision is at the moment. So that's something I'm urgently following up with Network Rail. So that's my chair's announcements. So the next item we have on the agenda is update from the County Councillor, but I did promise that I would come to Mr. Petts at this stage. So Mr. Petts, if you'd like to unmute, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, you're there.
okay. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It was really just a follow-up from the 2 posts that were put onto the Facebook page earlier this month regarding what then turned out to be 2022 CIL funding, asking for ideas on recreational facilities within the List Village. Okay, so I actually had quite an input into that. I actually tried to brainstorm, set some ideas up. But then, because my work circumstances have now changed, I'd like to get a little bit more involved with the community and potentially in the future with yourself. So what I was then trying to do was to try and understand the link between what was put on the Facebook page and then what became, from going through your minutes, the recreational strategy. And I believe that was put together by Councillor Baker in the October facilities meeting minutes. But I couldn't find anywhere on the website or anywhere what that recreational strategy actually is. My understanding is that he did a survey of all the recreational facilities, right? Came up with something, whatever that may be, and then in November introduced a paper considering the early priorities for that strategy, which include the MUGA over at Newman's College, making good some of the West List information, an adult exercise area, again in Newman's, but around the SDMP CIL funding of 2022. But I couldn't find anything on there that told me, well, how does that link in with List Forest, for instance, which I'm a resident of. So to me, there seemed to be a bit of a disparity between, on one hand, a recreational strategy, which appears to be in the facilities, but there's nothing that enables me to understand what that strategy is outside of the West List Play and Leisure project, which I understand is, you know, already ongoing and lots of CIL funding. So that was really the piece for me, was to, if I couldn't find it, then I'm sure that other people couldn't find it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it is still ongoing, but perhaps Nick's got his hand up. So if I ask Councillor Nick Wilson, who's chairman of the Facilities Committee, to answer you on that.
Well, first of all, just to congratulate Martin on following our proceedings rather more closely than most people in the parish. The reason you haven't seen it is we haven't published it yet, and indeed we haven't finalised the document to publish. As you're saying, Martin, there are some things that were already in process, such as bids we'd made to the South Downs National Park Authority based on previous consultations, which have resulted in some funding which we're going to put towards a complete renewal of the children's play area at West List, from about which we've had some very strong representations. The current equipment is now completely shot, really. It does need renewing. We are at this moment consulting on adult gym equipment, which is one of the other things we previously applied for and we're planning to apply for again. As far as young people go, we're currently in discussion with the Crossover Youth Centre, but we will be consulting on that when we've had a proposal from them. And in the spring, and I think it probably means about March, we will publish a strategy, a draft strategy document on which we will invite views. But, you know, I have definitely registered your brainstorming list, and I was planning to suggest that you come and meet with myself and Sarah, our clerk, to talk. We can talk about the strategy, and perhaps Richard would like to be involved, but also about your thoughts on the pond at Newman Collard playing fields. So it's just that it hasn't been published, but it will be, and we will be taking account, obviously, what we hear from people. At some point in that process, and we've been deferring it until we can do so, we will be having one or more public meetings once COVID guidance is been relaxed, and that again would be probably in March, certainly in the spring.
Okay. So the question then would be, as I understand it, the South Downs National Park CIL funding deadline is the 28th of February. If the consultations and the information and getting feedback from the community is not going to be till March, how's that going to work with any funds available within 22 for 22/23 if we don't meet the deadline?
Well, in the same way as it worked the previous 2 years that we put in the same applications to the Park Authority. We had consulted extensively about children's play equipment and have taken that into account. We're now consulting again about young people's facilities. Thinking has moved on in the community, but there will need to be a very substantial public consultation before we decide the detail of anything we may be able to fund. There will be some people, certainly the crossover, who are very keen on a skate park. There are many residents who in previous times, 10 years ago nearly, were hotly opposed to a skate park. This will not be an easy and rapid process of consultation, but we will be going in for an application by the end of February, because that's when the Park Authority needs it.
Okay.
We have to be.
Sorry,
sorry, Mr. Petts. Councillor Hargreaves has got his hand up. Roger.
Right. Hello. My name is Roger Hargreaves. I chair a group called the Project Review Group, and it is there to take an overview of all the projects we've got going, and particularly how we're going to spend money like SIL. Just to clarify on SIL is complicated because it actually, while a large part of it goes to the South Downs, and therefore we have to make a formal bid to the South Downs, and as you rightly say, they set their own timetable, quite a large chunk comes to us directly, and it is not tied to that timetable. So we have perhaps £300,000 potentially, which we directly control, and we can control the timing on that as well. So although where we can, we would like to try and make a bid for some of the money that the South Downs controls directly, although we have to compete with other parts of the South Downs for that. The money that comes directly to us, A, we can decide what to do with, and B, we're not tied to a timetable. It's that money more than anything else that we are concerned to try and get a view from people as to what we should spend it on. So really, things like the recreation strategy, and it will appear on other things, really a two-stage consultation. We ask for initial views from people, and that's what we're doing now. And then eventually when we put together a draft strategy, it will still be draft, and then there will be a much more formal consultation with people as to what they want us to do. And that sort of pattern you're going to see repeated over the next year as we wonder how to spend that 300,000 in a way that the community actually wants that money to be used.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Roger. I appreciate that. I think more than anything else, it was because the Facebook page made reference to the grant request within the February deadline. I was aware of the £300,000 sitting in the background, if you like, you know, but it was referenced, you know, I'd hate to miss a deadline.
Yeah.
Which, okay, we have no control over, you know, but also understanding that there are some funds available, you know, maybe in the interim period, or to top up something that may happen, if that is the case, in 23, 24, I guess. at that point?
Yes, I mean, to understand this deadline appears year after year after year. So if we miss something for this year, there's always next year, as well as spending the money that we control directly.
Okay. So just from the websites, I think the main two that really came out was the skate park. We had quite a few comments on that. And also the drainage issue of the List Forest recreation.
Sure. Yeah.
That has been there for years, and was also picked up on the List Village Development Plan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're quite right. I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Betts, and thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. I think that's been very valid. Can I'm conscious of time, so can I leave you to follow that up with Nick Wilson and Richard Baker?
Sarah.
Thank you.
Oh, Sarah, sorry, missed you.
Can I just quickly ask which Facebook post you're referring to? I have a feeling that something posted by the List Forest Residents Association, not actually an LPC post, but if you could clarify, that would be helpful.
It was the two that are controlled by yourselves, right? One was the List Forest community one, and the other one I think was the List community one, right? It wasn't anything to do with the List Forest, I don't believe.
Okay, I was just slightly confused. We have two on the go at the moment. One's village gateways and one's adult gym equipment. Those are the two that we have out at the moment.
I think the one that Martin has referred to in emails to me was also the List Forest community one, and that resulted from my making a presentation at their annual meeting, or our annual meeting, where I referred to the fact that we were in the process of developing a strategy, and the chair, Ruth Taylor, felt that it would be good to get in early with some ideas, which Martin's ideas have been registered with her as well as with us. So I don't think there's any danger of us missing Martin's thoughts, and I certainly had registered that you had said, Martin, that both the skate park and drainage were key issues.
That was the feedback, but again, part of the concern that I had, and I'm very aware of time, was that in actual fact, as I said to you, Councillor Wilson, we need to do something a bit wider, because on 2 Facebook pages we had something like 15 comments or something. We're just not getting into that real community feedback, which is my offer of help to you guys.
Thank you.
I think that's very valid, and I can see Councillor Wilson nodding. So, I'll leave the three of you to engage on that. But as I say, if you want to come back to a future meeting, please do, Mr. Betts. You'd be more than welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to move on to item 4 then, which is the update from the County Council, and to see Russell with us. So, Russell, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It won't take long because there wasn't a huge amount in my January report. I mentioned firstly the local government finance settlement that we got just before Christmas. And although there's more money, we have the problem of inflation, which is quite devastating to the County Council's finance. Materials costs going up, affecting highways, but also care costs going up. So the financial position is still rather uncertain, and that may continue for most of this year, I would have thought. The Motorbike Noise and Nuisance Parish Forum happened on Friday, just this Friday past, and I think went down quite well. But just to let you all know, we've got some average speed cameras going in around the Meon Hut on the A32 and the A272 going into Meon there. And although, that's quite specific to that locale, the idea is to reduce the appeal of the whole area to bikers who congregate there at Loomies and then go biking around East Hampshire. So most of the parishes that were on that call, there's about 50 people on that call, I think realised that it's good that we're doing something. It's better than doing nothing. And it will free up police resources to undertake enforcement action elsewhere. So I think it was a positive meeting, and I think Donna Jones has done well to get us to this point. The call for nature sites I mentioned, but that's now, I think, just come to a conclusion because the South Downs National Park Authority process is concluding today. But what I will just say is the South Downs National Park Authority is doing a very good job at the moment of attracting funding for, well, for carbon offset and biodiversity offset. So that bodes well for us in the national park because they'll have more funds to spend on projects. And then finally, I mentioned salt bins and what the guidance is about using the salt in the salt bins. That was everything in my report. Back to you, Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I can see that Councillor Smith has his hand up. Andy.
Good afternoon, Councillor Oppenheim. Thank you for joining us. I bet you can guess what I'm going to ask, but I just thought it'd be worth putting it on the record for anyone watching. Would it be possible to give an update on the repair that's planned for Hillborough Road, where the tarmac has been melted following the recent car fire? My understanding is that it's due to start in 4 to 6 weeks, but I just thought I'd check that with you for accuracy.
Yeah, it is on the schedule. I did chase it the other day, and thank you for flagging it up. And yes, the repairs are booked in. It's always difficult this time of year to be completely specific about dates because it is a bit weather dependent. It's the sort of repair you can't do in the rain. But yeah, let's give them a few more weeks and then I'll chase it again.
Thanks, Russell. And Councillor Wilson's got his hand up. Nick.
Russell, as usual, thanks very much for your report. Always very helpful, and particularly so with the renaturing, since I'd almost forgotten the deadline. But just by way of sort of updating, we have put in 2 expressions of interest as agreed at the last Facilities Committee. One for a piece of land by the Fern Hills allotments, where there's a lot of tree cover, oak trees previously used by the woodland folk, and we're hoping to involve this environmental guardians there, and also a small piece, very tiny piece of land next to the pavilion at West List, where we want to talk to the guardians about possibly wildflower or whatever. I can't claim to have great expertise as to what the Park Authority want to achieve, but hopefully they'll give some advice as to whether we should pursue this or not. But thank you for reminding me.
Thanks, Nick. That's good to hear.
Okay, thank you, Russell. That's been really good. So updates from the district councillors. Well, I'm going to begin with the hopefully uncontentious one, and then we'll come to the possibly contentious one. The hopefully uncontentious one is that with my chair of parish and town council liaison panel head hat on, my new hat or new official hat, I've circulated an email to all clerks, which hopefully will be circulated out to councillors too, which basically is asking what training would you like to see EHDC provide to parish councils. And at the moment, from the responses I've had from across the district, and I'll just say it's been pleasing so far that everyone across the district has been welcoming me to the new role rather than shooting me down on day one. The responses are most people want planning training, they want training in standards, and there's also a call for training for new councillors. So that new councillors can, if you like, have an induction session, which will hopefully bring them up to speed with everything that a parish council should and shouldn't be doing. So they're the 3 standouts at the moment from the response I've had, but only about 20% of parish councillors have so far responded. There's still a couple of weeks to respond, but if you can get those responses in, that would be great, so that Sarah can collate them and get them onto me, because I need to be able to go to Cabinet before the end of this financial year to explain what I'd like training to be provided on, and I obviously want to try and meet as many of the requirements as I can, At the moment, hopefully we can meet all of them, but obviously if more requirements come about, then it may not be possible to meet all of them in the next year, but we'll do what we can. So that's the easy bit. I guess I'm hoping no one's going to argue with me on that one. But the second bit is obviously the news you would have seen in the newspapers, and some of you I've spoken to since the news broke, which is that our leaders of East Hampshire and Havant have taken the decision that it's time to end the partnership, the joint working partnership between the two councils. And I think, first of all, I'd like to say that the partnership has achieved an awful lot over the last 12 years, and I think it was the right thing of its time. But I also understand the reasons as to why now is probably a good time to split. Part of it is financial, part of it is that the councils do have different priorities. And the third part probably is about potential local government reorganisation in the future, where haven't perhaps see a much more natural fit with the other councils of South Hampshire than we do in East Hampshire, because we're sort of, once you get, I guess the southern parishes might be a little different, but once you get the hill in the way, then we tend not to think of ourselves as being in South Hampshire. It should open up opportunities for the district council to get closer to the community. So that's part of the idea. I don't, it's an open secret that Penn's Place is scheduled for disposal. And once that happens, and obviously this might accelerate that slightly, but once that happens, then we're looking at potentially basing the district council around a number of hubs. And at the moment, thoughts are hubs in Petersfield, Borden and Alton, but that's not yet confirmed by any sense, in any sense of depth or scope. But certainly the potential said, we used to have an office in Alton, we used to have an office in, well, we did have an office in List, sharing the office with the clerk at one time. And so there is potential for getting out there closer to the people again, and we've become very much East Hampshire focused. And it does allow us the flexibility that whatever the Hampshire county strategy may become in time, that to make our own decisions on what we think is good or bad. And yeah, it's not a decision that's been taken lightly. It's not yet been ratified in full by East Hampshire District Council, but hopefully that will happen on Thursday. So far, both cabinets in Havant and East Hampshire have agreed with the principle, but it's not yet gone to the full councils. But once it does, then things will really move on at speed. Things are already moving on at speed, to be fair. And everyone's aiming that the separation will be achieved by May. Now, whether that will actually happen or not, there's an awful lot of things that have to all come together in that, because obviously something that's been 12 years together isn't quite so easily split apart. And obviously the staff have been a prime consideration in that as to how it's going to affect them. That's probably all I want to say on it at the moment, but if you have any feedback, I'll gladly take it. If you have any questions, I may not be able to answer the question, A, because I may well not know the answer, or B, I may know the answer, but there are certain things that are still commercially confidential at this stage because of obviously where we are, particularly with outside suppliers and so on. But yeah, I think in a nutshell, they're the two things that I want to report from the District Council. Russell, I don't know if there's anything else you want to report.
No, nothing additional to that today. Hopefully I'll have more about climate next time, but I haven't got anything to add today. So yeah, that's it. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Andy?
It's not a question on anything that you've actually mentioned there, Keith. It's just about green waste collection, because it's been sporadic at best. And it's really hard to work out exactly when people are coming around. And a lot of people are saying, a lot of residents are saying to me, we're leaving the bins out for ages, and there's just no communication about it. So I wondered if you could take it back to colleagues at the council about the need for at least communicating with residents about what the new pattern looks like and how regularly it can be expected to be collected. Because at the moment, brown bins are everywhere all the time.
Yeah, no, agreed. No, I understand that, and it's something not surprising. Perhaps I've had messages in my inbox about, but yeah, I will pass that back and see what I can do. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we'll move on to the minutes of the informal meeting of the council of the 13th of December and the formal meeting of the 17th of December. Does anyone have any errors or omissions in the minutes they want to raise? Leanne?
Yeah, there's just a couple of typos, I think. On page 2, under B, I think that should be ambitious, shouldn't it?
Which one, Leanne?
Oh.
Sorry, which meeting?
The informal meeting.
Oh, the informal meeting. Okay, yeah.
Chronological order. So it's page 2, B, it should be the ambitious intention.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's a very small typo on 7, second line up from the bottom, should be on, I think. And on number 9, 1, 2, 3, the 4th bullet point, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, it starts with Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah.
Noted the need for, and instead of crossover, it should be LPC.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else got anything? No, in which case, can I have someone to propose them, please?
Keith, sorry, there is something else. Number 15, the first line doesn't read properly.
Okay, let me just have a look. Number 15. Councillor inquired about how 2 further council resignations and any lessons learned. Ah, okay, yeah.
I think the word how just needs to be the.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, Councillor Lindsay inquired about the 2 further council resignations. Yeah.
Keith, sorry, Chair, we can't formally approve these minutes, can we? Because it's an informal meeting.
No, so the formal approval will be for the formal meeting, the meeting that we had at the pavilion.
Keith, I think Nick means the approval of these minutes. So I think the idea.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, sorry, Nick.
General agreement.
I wasn't thinking. Yeah, we need to approve them at a formal meeting. Yeah, okay. We'll just carry them forward then. Yeah, good point. Sorry, I wasn't thinking there. I kept forgetting that this wasn't a formal meeting. So yeah.
So they can either go to the next meeting or they can be approved under delegated arrangements.
I think given their minutes, we'll just carry them forward to the next meeting. So right, okay. So that's that done. Any matters arising?
Well, I hope that we're going to have a discussion at some point about the delegated arrangements and the issues I've raised in the emails.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I mean, we can take those now if you want, Leanne.
Well, I think maybe we need to perhaps do the minutes, the next minutes, and maybe then do it.
Okay. Okay. So move on then in that case to the RFO's report on payments and receipts for the period 8th of December 2021 to 12th of January 2022.
Sorry, Keith, I meant to do the other minutes.
Sorry. I thought we'd done both of those. Sorry, I apologise.
Okay.
Okay, so the formal meeting of the 17th of December. So anyone anything to raise on those minutes then? I mean, it's a very short meeting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to on the first one. It's already been referred to as number 14, where I asked about any lessons learned from the large number of resignations we've had recently, and you gave an answer which was sort of saying you would come back on something, but you weren't sure what you could come back on at the time.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think what I can say, Howard, is that I think in terms of lessons learned, if you like, was that we needed to be perhaps clearer to prospective councillors on the time commitment they should reasonably expect to put into the council, because I think maybe that's something we underplayed previously, and I think because of that, some councillors who joined us during the lockdown period when we were doing everything by Zoom, when I think it's fair to say for the majority of the council, we were spending far less time on council matters than perhaps we do normally. That they then found that when we were back in quotes the real world, that wasn't the case, and that there was more commitment, and that they hadn't quite maybe either realised that commitment, or maybe they had realised that commitment but hadn't realised how much their normal life, their working life and everything else would expand once things were back to normal, so that they didn't have the free time that they thought they were going to have. Now, I think, in all fairness, I think it's fair to say that in the interviews which we did for the prospective councillors this time around, I think we did emphasise that, and I think they all understood that. And I mean, fellow councillors can draw their own conclusions on that, but given that everyone hopefully was either at the interviews or viewed the recordings, then hopefully it did come over more clearly of what that time commitment was.
Okay, thanks. Do we still give a pack out to prospective councillors detailing what the job is, an introductory pack? Do we still give that out?
I don't know. I'd need to ask Sarah on that. Sarah?
You mean when to prospective councillors or to new councillors? To
anybody applying to be a councillor.
I've never given a pack out to applicants, but we do give out quite a lot of information to new councillors, but there isn't a pack for prospective applicants.
Okay, perhaps we should consider that, because this particular problem here, it's too late once they become a councillor.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, huh? I'll take that one on board. Leanne?
I was just going to make reference to our training policy, but that's really more for councillors that are stepping on to the parish council rather than rather than people who are inquiring.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. And Andy, you had your hand up and then it went down again.
I was going to observe that I don't recall getting a prospective councillor pack when I joined, and that's like probably about 10 years ago now, or slightly less than that. And also, I am just mindful of the environmental impact of handing out lots of paper to people. So I just wonder if we could look at possibly having a page on the website for prospective councillors that we can point people to, rather than, and offer to print it out if necessary, rather than just provide lots of paper in terms of the climate emergency and saving the planet.
I think it's a valid point. Yeah. Okay. Well, leave that one for. I'll have a discussion offline with Sarah about that, and we'll see perhaps what we can do. Okay.
You're missing Richard. You're
no.
missing Richard.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, I have the dubious distinction of being the most recent councillor, you know, in this gathering. And firstly, I wasn't giving any introduction material on applying. However, I was given the opportunity by Sarah to go and meet her and have a chat about what the council was about. And I took that opportunity and I found it extremely useful indeed. So I think that's something you could encourage. And secondly, when I did, you know, finally get in, I was given quite a lot of information actually, and also a list of courses that I could get on, and I did try to get on quite a few of them.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Jenny.
Just to follow up what Richard said there, I had the same experience. Like, the support and information I've been offered by all of the councillors has been remarkable, actually, especially in light of recent things where I have had less time. Everyone has been very supportive on how I can still do this. So I think there is the expectation for what you have in your mind for how much time it will take is potentially more than that, but the flexibility is there to support that, most definitely, from all the councillors and from the council staff as well.
Excellent, thanks, Jenny. That's really good. Okay, so hope that's answered that one, Howard.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that wasn't intended as criticism of anybody, but
no, sure,
things go on, and after about 10 years, you suddenly realised it stopped. And
no, you're quite right. You're quite right.
I'll quickly add. Lizzie did actually put a new page on the website recently called "How to Become a Parish Councillor." So there is some information there. I'm looking at it now, but I'm sure we can look to expand it so that it's a good source of information for anybody that wishes to apply, that we can then direct them to.
I wonder if it's worth sending it around and to all councillors who can comment and put any ideas that they might.
Yeah, okay.
But it's on the website, so everyone can access it. It's under Your Council, How to Become a Parish Councillor. So please feel free to feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I do remember when I joined the council, however many moons ago that was. I think we just moved on from scribes. There was a 2-page sheet then about what a parish councillor was, but I don't know whether that's still in existence or not. Don, you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I only had my thank you. I only had my hand up to say that Sarah had her hand up, and you were ignoring it. But I think it's but it is a very, very important discussion, and I think the response is very good. I'm thinking about it. I think it's absolutely right. It is very important that there is something for new prospective councillors, and there may not have been these 2 recent or relatively recent resignations if we've done that in the past.
Yeah,
but the other thing I thought about, training is also very important. An earlier item, but training obviously has slipped a bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Who is going to do the training that you have in mind? I mean, obviously the person who does the training, or the people who do the training, is very important.
It will be officers from East Hants who do the training.
Right.
Okay.
Could I make one further comment on that?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we're always not as good as we should be at is that when we're having meetings, we discuss things and sometimes mention people that those who've been around a long time know who they are, but the new people haven't a clue who they are. And I think all of us have a responsibility to try to make sure what we say is understood by people who haven't got such a long experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. Yeah, I'll accept that, Howard. Okay, so does anyone have any comments on the minutes of the formal meeting of the 17th of December? No. Okay. Good. So, do you want to come to your point now, Leanne?
Yeah, well, we said we'd have a discussion following on from all the emails that were about, principally between myself and Sarah, and then Nick sent one later. You know, about the current situation and the informal meetings, and what I feel really has been a kind of lack of discussion amongst all councillors about how we moved forward in the current climate of the COVID. The decision being made to go to informal meetings, and then the delegated authority, which I felt I'd agreed to on the basis of changes in government policy, of which there haven't been any.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think the main concern is that there's a legal duty on myself and on Sarah as our clerk to ensure the health and safety of the councillors and the people who work for the council.
Yeah.
And that has to be our primary concern. Above, I would say above everything else, that has to be our primary concern.
Mm.
We sought guidance from HELP, who we pay for that guidance, and their guidance was that if it was possible not to have meetings in person, then they shouldn't happen. And so we considered what options that left us with, and the options then were either we had meetings in person, which neither of us felt comfortable with at all, or we had no meeting at all, but that wasn't possible because we needed to agree the budget, because we did have a legal obligation to agree the budget, or we had a Zoom meeting and then we formalized that by having a formal meeting a few days later, which is what we decided to do.
But another way forward, Keith, could have been for the council as a whole, the councillors as a whole, to have had a discussion about it and fed back how each person felt about each option.
Yes, I agree with you that could have happened. Yeah, I quite agree.
And I feel it should, because we're all parish councillors, whether we're elected, whether we're co-opted, we're all parish councillors, and we are List Parish Council. You are, yeah. I'm not denying that for one moment. And with regard to how, as I said in the email, yes, we do pay a fee for their professional services, but their paper is based on opinion and advice.
Yes, agreed.
It's not legally binding.
No.
And the government has not changed its position. And as it said in that paper, there have been challenges.
There have been challenges. Yes, you're quite right. But
not successful.
But ultimately, it falls to myself and Sarah.
Well, but there's been no discussion with anybody else on the council.
But there doesn't need to be.
I think there does need to be. That's my whole
well,
point.
yes, you might think there needs to be, Leanne. I agree with you. And in an ideal world, maybe there would be, and with hindsight, maybe there should have been. But we were stuck in a situation where we had a few days to make a decision, and we made, based on the advice we had from HELP, based on discussions that I had with the monitoring officer at East Hants, what we felt was the best decision.
It's what you felt the decision, and the fact is, Keith, that in today's world, with phones and texts and emails, you can get answers very quickly.
You can, but let me put to you a scenario. What if we had that discussion and the weight of feeling was that we wanted to meet in person?
Yeah.
Sarah and I considered that, and we allowed that to happen. A member of the public then attended that meeting. Mm-hmm. That member of the public went down with COVID attached to that meeting. Then suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where we're assessed to have not taken the best decision. Mm. Now, I appreciate that's unlikely.
It's also very hypothetical, Keith.
Well, it is, but everything's hypothetical.
But there are other councils, other parish councils.
There are. Can I stop you there? There are other councils who are meeting in person. Agreed. I'm not disputing that. there are other councils who have not yet started meeting in person at all since the first time that we went into lockdown. And so that there are the two extremes. And you know, we're in a situation where we had to make what we felt was the right decision. As I already said, the situation is changing, and I'm hopeful that next month we can be back in the room.
am too. But
I'm you know, at the end of the day, I had to make a decision. We're along with Sarah, and we made the decision. I appreciate you're unhappy with the decision. I take that.
Well,
but I'm not prepared to have a debate about it.
I'm unhappy with the lack of consultation of the council as a whole, not just me, but everybody.
Okay, I hear your point. Other people got their hands up. I'm going to quickly go round to them, and I'm going to wrap this item up because I'm not prepared to have a debate about it. Next.
Well, we actually decided we were going to have a discussion tonight.
Well, we are having a discussion.
Yeah.
Nick.
Chair, my memory was when first time round with the first lockdown, when we sort of could have met in face to face or not, we were concerned about putting pressure on any councillor to attend a meeting where they were uncomfortable, and we thought this was a good compromise. We did have an opportunity to discuss whether it was right this time round at the informal meeting on the 13th of December. But I don't remember we having this sort of discussion.
We didn't have a discussion, Nick, and actually the first lockdown there was legislation put in place for.
Can I finish, Leanne?
Yes, of course you can.
You had a lot to say about this on the emails and in this meeting, and it's holding up doing actual business. What I was going to say was we did have that opportunity to discuss. We then had a formal meeting. We're now having an informal meeting, and we will presumably have some decisions which we have delegated authority for. I absolutely agree we should review it in the light of the government guidance changing as it's about to do. But at the moment, we're all being told if we can work at home, we should. And I think it's unfair to put pressure on people to attend meetings in public. Personally, I would like other meetings I've had to attend to have been by Zoom, but that wasn't an option that was offered to me.
Yeah, but as I understand it, parish councillors can't work from home. Clerks and office staff can join a in-person meeting via Zoom, but councillors can't. Councillors have to be there at the meeting. That's my understanding.
Roger.
Well, I'm very tempted to make a point of order because I think the point having been made, it doesn't allow a councillor to go on and on making the same point and stopping others having a say. I have to say I totally disagree with Leanne's point of view on this issue. I'm entirely content with the way the decision was made. And actually, the only thing we ought to debate is what are we going to do for the next meeting? Because there is no point in going over the ground as to what we do about this meeting unless Leanne is suggesting we abandon it halfway through. So the issue is, how do we make a decision about the next meeting?
Yeah, I think that's valid. Okay, let's do around and test opinion then, because I'm quite happy to do that. By use, well, I'll go around each person in turn as I got them on the screen, because there aren't that many of us. So can you say whether at the next meeting in 4 weeks' time, given what's happened in the COVID situation, which as they does seem to be that the numbers are coming down, they're still high, but they are coming down. Do you feel comfortable if we could ensure social distancing that we meet again in the village hall? Claire?
I know that the laws don't allow for it, but I'm more comfortable with Zoom than I am in-person meetings. However, knowing that we can't, as long as we can keep ourselves separated, I'm quite happy to meet in person.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
I'm entirely comfortable to meet in person, but I completely understand people not being, and I fully support the chairman in this.
Thank you. Sarah, as a clerk?
I personally am happy to meet in person. My position has always been to make sure that I don't make anybody feel uncomfortable about having to attend in person.
Okay,
But
thank you.
personally, yes.
Andy?
I believe we should continue to follow the government guidance as we've been doing in all through this process. The reason why we had a informal meeting and a quorum meeting was because the government guidance changed at the time to work from home if you can. So I would happily meet in person, but I wouldn't happily meet in person if the government guidance hasn't changed and it's still work from home if you can, because we can have an informal meeting as we are doing and then take a decision under the delegated powers motion, which is in place until the work from home guidance changes or until we meet in person again. So I would rather that we took a view collectively on email once the guidance changes. If the guidance doesn't change, I don't think we should meet in person.
Okay, thank you. Howard?
Well, I think having discussions on whether the government guidance has changed is a difficult one, unless you account for the fact that often it changes twice a day. It's not necessarily changing the law. I think it's difficult. When we had the first lockdown, I was labelled by the government as being vulnerable on 2 of the 3 categories. The one I missed out on was I wasn't pregnant, but I was very concerned on that. I'm still quite concerned because I believe I'm still as vulnerable as I was then. On the other hand, I'm not comfortable with what we're actually doing. I'm not completely comfortable, but I haven't thought of a better solution. I think another thing that is confusing is that technically you are the chair of the council, not the leader of the council. And this happens to all chairmen. It happened when I was chair. But in reality, the chair of the council is seen by the public as being the leader of the council and often get involved in situations. I think we have to be very careful that we only do things that are absolutely essential. And I mean, for instance, if I may refer to item 14 on the agenda, councillor co-option, I'm not sure what the purpose of that item is. I can't think of any purpose of it.
Okay, well, the reason it was put there was because yourself and others suggested that you'd like an opportunity to discuss those councillors who've applied for adoption. Okay, but I thought the answer I got to that was that we wouldn't have a discussion one day and then vote on another day. You know, the two go together. The discussion and the voting has got to be done together. And as we can't actually co-opt anybody at the moment, I don't understand why that's there. Okay, I'm happy to carry that forward to next month. I don't have a problem with that. Oh, okay. Well, I think it will. The only time we can do it is when we go back to face-to-face meetings, and I'm not trying to push that as something should happen next month or next year or whatever. But okay, no, I hear what you say, Sarah.
Yeah, personally, I thought that the councillor co-option discussion and voting would take place today with delegated arrangements confirming what the consensus was. That was how I thought it would develop. So there would be an informal vote, but then the formal position would be taken under the delegated arrangements.
Well, you can't do that because we passed a motion specifically stopping us deciding on who the next councillors are. It was, and we did it in the car park thing. We set out what was be to discuss, what could be, done by delegated powers, and appointing new councillors is specifically excluded in that motion.
Okay. Ned.
On the general question, I'm with Andy. I am concerned about anyone who might feel vulnerable. I personally don't. I've had COVID, I've had 3 jabs. I'm happy to meet in person, but I wouldn't want us to go to that if there are people who are very uncomfortable. I think we should continue to adopt a pragmatic approach and trust those to whom we've delegated to give effect to the views of an informal meeting. But by the next meeting, I suspect the government guidelines will be quite different, and probably will be meeting in person. I'm just a bit concerned, having heard from Howard about his own position. On the issue of co-opting, we have done it before when we were using Zoom, and I don't see why we shouldn't do it again as we do here. It seems to me a particularly good opportunity to actually have that discussion, since certainly I have refreshed my mind as to the 3 candidates. And I think it would be a total waste of time, having spent that time preparing, not to actually have a vote this evening. I think it would be crackers, frankly.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I've just gone back and checked the motion. I didn't think it was the case. There's nothing stopping a decision about councillor co-option under the delegated arrangements. The idea is that it's there that decisions can be made to ensure business continuity, and I think appointing councillors is about business continuity, because we need councillors on board. There's lots to be done. We need to get them on board. So I don't see why under that delegated motion the decision can't be formalised following an informal discussion today.
Okay, Don.
Well, can I
Sorry,
that is not reading the motion. It's saying it has to be not reasonably referred.
Not reasonably deferred, you mean?
Sorry, deferred. Must be made in order to comply with commercial or statutory deadline. It's not clear on that motion whether that's an and or an or, but if we go down a couple of lines, the delegation does not extend to matters expressly reserved to the council in legislation. And one of the things that is in the legislation is that the decision has to be made by the council. And this motion says the delegation does not extend to matters expressly reserved in the council in legislation. So that excludes us adopting them until we have a full, proper council meeting. And I seconded that motion, and I seconded that motion on that understanding.
Okay. Don.
Thank you, Keith. A very difficult question. It seems to me that the problem here is the government has been quite appalling on this. It's spent so much time planning and having parties that it really hasn't dealt with people trying to meet properly, other people. I actually personally, a pure personal preference, like these Zoom meetings. I think one of the best things that came out of COVID was the ability to have some Zoom meetings. I think it actually added to democracy, made it easier to people to get in if they wanted to, although unfortunately in this not many people do. But I have complete sympathy for what Leanne said and what Howard has said. I do think at the moment it is not legal to have an informal meeting. Or to make a decision at an informal meeting. I don't think we really probably have them. You're not meant to have informal meetings before council meetings. You can have party political meetings behind the scenes and then come along and then vote and then have a debate in a proper convened meeting. But you're not meant to make your decisions in advance by any informal discussion. This at least has what we're doing today is open to the public. So it does get over that particular problem. I don't know if any of them are coming in on it. So my bottom line is that that I like Zoom meetings, but I do think at the moment the government has not put legislation in saying we can have them at the moment. And I think we should comply with what the legislation says. what has happened in a number of other councils, Liphook's one of them. Liphook is having open meetings, so socially distanced, and people have to go through the procedures to get into the meeting. But they actually wrote a letter, as a number of other councils were asked to the government, saying, will you please sort it out and come back to us and say why we can't have Zoom meetings at the moment. But of course, we've got no reply to that because they've been dealing with parties instead. So the bottom line is I would be happy to come to an in-person meeting. I like the Zoom meetings, but I think we should have in-person meetings. I think that's what the law is at the moment. Hopefully it'll change very quickly. Going on to the last point, the point on the co-option, I do agree with Howard. A co-option is effectively an electoral process. On the previous occasions, we've had secret ballots in order to elect people. I think you've handled them, Keith, with your ability to do it electronically. And it is a substitute for, of course, an election. So I don't think you can co-opt someone under delegated powers because you're not holding an election. Whether we can hold an election today, I don't know. I leave it to you as chair to decide, because we then have the catch-22 situation. This is not a formal meeting, but we do want to do something by a vote.
Okay.
So, good luck on reaching the right decision.
Thanks, Tom. Roger.
On the last point, I am inclined to the view that it would be sensible to have a discussion on co-option today, and indeed actually take a view. Although I do subscribe to the view it needs to be ratified probably by a formal meeting of the council. So they won't actually be appointed until that moment takes place. But this seems to me the opportunity to actually consider the three applications and take a view as to who we wish to appoint. More generally, I've been quite content with the decision-making process on this meeting. I think the next meeting, it is difficult because I do think the guidelines will have changed. I was about to say clarified, but I doubt if they'll be clarified. I think they will just change. I would plan personally for a meeting in person, but I do think nearer the day, there may be a need to review that and decide whether we should still keep to Zoom or not.
Okay, yeah. Leanne?
Well, you know what my view is.
Yeah.
I do like Zoom meetings when the legislation is in place.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I feel very uncomfortable with these informal meetings. I'm very uncomfortable with the scheme of delegation, which I thought I was agreeing to in advance of a change of government policy and guidelines.
Okay, no, your point's well made on that. Jenny?
I'm not experienced enough to know about the legislation. I'm just not. My feeling would be that all the time we're advised to work at home. It would make sense to me to have meetings online. Every meeting I'm having is online. I can't genuinely remember the last time I met someone face to face. I do understand that there is legislation side to that. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as we can do these meetings and keep, that I think it's a very valid point of trying to keep everybody safe. I'm not vulnerable myself, but I'm surrounded by vulnerable people. So it is massively important to me that we keep this bubble quite closed. But I understand there are decisions that have to be made face to face. And co-option wise, again, I'm not experienced enough to know the background to that. So by the sounds of it, I don't know what was done when I joined, but I think that's because there was legislation in place to have online meetings. Yeah. Then that's all I've got. I don't think it's something worth me sticking a finger in that particular pie when I don't know enough about it. No.
Okay. Right. Well, in that case, because I'm conscious of the time and we want to move on, I'm going to make.
There's Sheila, Keith.
Oh, Sheila, sorry, I forgot I missed you. Sorry. It's because as we're talking, people move around on the screen, which makes it hard to keep track of who's spoken. Sheila, you're on mute at the moment, Sheila. No, you're still on mute. You're still on mute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you now.
Right. I would agree that face-to-face meetings are the best, but I also know that some people don't feel comfortable in that. and I think people need to feel comfortable. And I agree with you that legislation will probably change very quickly, and in all likelihood, next month's meeting will be face-to-face. And as long as all the safety precautions are put in place, I think they're preferable. In terms of discussing the candidates and even voting for them, we've done all that electronically before. We've voted by pressing whatever it was, that system you put up. And it worked perfectly well. So I don't see why it wouldn't work tonight.
Okay. Right. I'm based on that. I'm going to make two judgments then, I think, as much as I can. I think the first one is going to be that we will aim to meet in person next month, pending any changes in legislation or any changes in guidance that come out of central government before then. And I've picked my words carefully there to hopefully appease Leanne a little. I'm saying out of central government. So I don't care if the guidance from help changes. I'm saying if the guidance comes from central government that changes, then we will meet in person. Obviously, if COVID numbers shoot back up again and the guidance changes, then Sarah and I will have to make a judgment, but I will try. And given that we got more time this time, because that was the pressing thing last time, given that we got more time this time, then I will aim to seek your views. But ultimately, it does have to be myself and Sarah's decision because of health and safety legislation. And there's no way around that. At the end of the day, it's not a council decision, it's our decision because we're responsible as the law says we are. So that's the issue that we have there. On the issue of the co-option, I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I think given the general mood of the meeting, feel of the meeting, we will have to ask Mr. Petts to leave because I don't think it's right that we do it with a member of the public in the room. But we will have a discussion about the candidates and we will have a vote. However, taking Don's point into mind, which I totally agree with, we will have to ratify that vote at next month's meeting, assuming we then meet in person. So the new councillors won't start with us until March, if my thinking is correct. But I think it does make sense to do that electronically because it's an easy way to do it. We're here, we've done it before. So let's do it. And I think we've got a good number of councillors here tonight, which again is good because when we had the last meeting individual with council, we only had, I think it was 5 of us or 6 of us in the room. So I think let's do that. Mr. Petts, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was listening to the conversation, very interesting, when you were talking about the co-opting of the councillors. Just because of GDPR, I couldn't be part of it. And can I also remind you to turn your YouTube off as well?
Yes, I'd already planned to do that, Mr. Petts. Yeah. but thank you for the reminder. Yeah. No, it's a very good point. Okay. So
can I just come back on your last statement there? Assuming that we do have a face-to-face meeting in February.
Yes.
We can do what we've done for a number of years because new councillors might not be aware you don't take office until the next council meeting. But what we've done is, let's say we have a face-to-face meeting in February, we have a council meeting 15 minutes before, 30 minutes before, whatever's needed, vote there, close the meeting, and then we open our normal meeting. So the person can still be there in February. But I do repeat the point I made on it's appointing new councillors is probably the most responsible thing we do.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that, Howard, but I think I think
if I just finish the sentence, but I still think that if you are discussing something, you discuss it as near to the vote as possible.
Yeah.
And we can't have a vote tonight because we're in an informal meeting. And it's not as if it's a straightforward yes or no decision, because we have to pick the first councillor and then pick the second. And so, you know, you just need the discussion with the adoption, not something you've had maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months before. And also, of course, specifically, we have said in the motion we passed at the last council meeting, the car park one, that we should not allow that to go to delegation. It's quite clear, quite unambiguous.
Okay. Given, I hear what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying. And
sorry, Chair, just because Howard is the last person to have spoken, I actually don't think that necessarily was the mood of the meeting.
No, that's very true.
While the interviews are fresh in our minds, this is the time to make our views known in terms of voting.
Yeah.
We then can capture that, record that was the vote, and if at the formal council meeting someone wants to reopen it, then they could. But I think that would be totally perverse.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think I want to remain on the council if that were to happen. We surely could trust each other to make a sound judgment, even in an informal meeting.
Yeah.
And ratified in a formal meeting. I really do think we should.
Yeah, I hear it. Sorry that you didn't let me get to the end of what I was going to say.
I support what Nick has said 100%.
Yeah. No, I agree, Roger. What I was going to say to Howard was that I heard what he said, but I'm going to stick to what I said, which is that we will vote on it tonight, but I do agree with him about the meeting before February Council, where we can ratify that vote, and that meeting therefore does mean that people should start at the February meeting, assuming that vote ratifies what we say tonight. Sheila.
And another thing we've got to think of is that we told those applicants that we would get in touch with them within, what was it we said, 2-3 weeks?
Yes, yeah.
So we can't keep them waiting.
No, and I am also conscious that there are more of us here tonight than there have been at meetings for a good length of time. So I think we will have the vote and we'll ratify it at the next meeting. And if I'm found to be wrong on that, well, I'll take my chance. Right, let's move on, because otherwise we're never even going to get to item 14. Item 8, the RFO's report on payments and receipts for the period to the 8th of December 2021 to the 12th of January 2022. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the payments? And if so, I'll try and get Claire, hopefully, to answer them. Anyone, any issues with the report? No, I'm not seeing any hands or anything. So, okay, we'll move on. The next item is correspondence from the 20s Plenty for Hampshire campaign. And I noticed that Russell's left the meeting, which is a little bit of a shame. But this is a campaign being mounted by several parish councillors in Hampshire to put the idea of having more 20-mile-an-hour limits across the county. And the thought is that if parish councils all work together, that we perhaps stand more chance of getting those 20-mile-an-hour limits. My personal view on this, and I will open it up to take others' views, but my personal view on this is there's only any point having 20-mile-an-hour limits if they're going to be enforced. And the view of the previous police and crime commissioner was that they wouldn't be enforced. And the view of the Chief Constable of Hampshire Police was that they wouldn't be enforced. And so given that at that time, my view was, if someone had asked me then, I'd have said, well, there's no point, because if they're not going to be enforced, once people realise they're not being enforced, everyone's going to ignore them anyway. I have asked the current Police and Crime Commissioner what her view is on this, Donna Jones, but she hasn't come back to me as of yet. So I can't tell you what her view is, because I simply don't know. So my view is that we ought to approach this with a little bit of caution, but I'm happy to be swayed by the majority of most people think we should join this campaign. I'm happy for this Parish Council to join the campaign. So anybody got any views on it? Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I actually attended that motorcycle noise meeting that Russell alluded to earlier, and Donna was at that meeting. And one of the things she was saying quite casually was if she had an underspend, and she implied she would have an underspend, she was happy to buy cameras, more cameras. So I don't know whether that statement that you made about it not being forced is true or not. Certainly the logo she has under her camera when she was on Zoom, was more police in Hampshire. So I don't think you can make the assumption that that there's no point in having these limits just because they weren't being enforced. So and I personally think there is some evidence that even if some people ignore them, that having 20 miles an hour does reduce the general speed of motorists. I think that's actually quite there's quite a lot of compelling evidence for that. So I personally think it's a good idea.
Okay, Andy?
I'm going to say something very similar. I think that that there's definitely no harm in joining the campaign, because speeding in the village is of significant concern to a number of residents. On enforcement, I don't understand the difference between enforcing a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit as is compared to a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that's there. And actually, that's a kind of policing priorities and resources issue that's not about the appropriateness of the kind of speed for the road, but actually enforcement that they need to wrestle with, actually. So enforcement, I think, personally, is a bit of a red herring argument, because it's the police's job to work out how to do that stuff. So I think we should support this. I don't think we need emotion. I think we can just agree to kind of right in support. But I would strongly support it, particularly given the concern of residents around this and the kind of mobilisation of Speedwatch and other groups that are kind of trying to tackle it.
Okay, yeah, Sheila.
I was just going to say, as a member of Speedwatch, in fact, people who are caught exceeding the limit, their numbers are given to the police. So there is a certain amount of enforcement because the police follow it up. So I would agree that, yes, I think it's a good idea, as Andy said, whether people will stick to it or not. But there is that measure of enforcement.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, I don't want to go on too long. This is a subject very close to my heart. One reason for this, I may be the only one here. I hope I am. But the mother of a friend of mine was actually killed in Whitehill in one of these horrible circumstances of people driving far too fast when they shouldn't have been. That tends to favour your views of things when you have that happening. But I also, as I said, this is a subject that I'm very interested in. I also intended to go to the meeting that took place on the 14th of January that Richard, I think, referred to earlier. That's interesting in itself, because that was about the A272 in particular. I remember when I first stood for Police and Crime Commissioner back in 2012. At that time, 50% of the deaths in Hampshire were actually on the A272. And the reason actually was because bikers used it as a sort of racing track. And there were lots of accidents, people coming off the bikes. Now, if you go, I'm sure a number of you go along the A272 regularly, and you'll find there are lots of different speed limits all the way along. You had 40, 30, 60, all the way through. I do think that the 20-mile-an-hour limits are extremely important. Why I wasn't able to go to the meeting last Friday was because one of the things I've been working on in Liphook is liaison with the police. And the police, in fact, Hampshire police, obviously, local police, asked for a meeting with me and the executive officer, as he's called in Liphook, and with the other councillor, Simon Coyte, who works with me on the police liaison. And this was a subject we discussed more than any other. We were talking about antisocial behaviour, and drugs was the particular problem that is all over the place. But we ended up talking much more about speeding and the problems of it. And we were talking about whether, for example, we could put in the neighbourhood plan in Liphook, which is still going 7 years later, whether we could put in things about traffic calming as part of the plan. The response from the police was going, I think what Sheila said just now, was that they think the key issue is actually speed watch. And speed watch is relatively active in Liphook at the moment. It's done by a friend of mine, fellow councillor Eddie Trotter leads it. The county councillors, Sarah, Mrs. Kerno Ford is very keen on it as well, Debbie Kerno Ford, and have been doing a lot of it. And the view of the police was that as long as you've got a good speed watch, it really is effective to deal with the speed limits. And again, putting it in context, we've been doing a lot of speed watching activities, and we found there are an amazing number of people driving at over 50 miles per hour in 30-mile-per-hour limits. And there have been a number of crashes in the Liphook area. I can't remember any in list myself, but I'm sure you all know, Keith, if they have been. So I really do think the 20-mile-per-hour limit is absolutely critical at the centres of town, particularly, of course, near schools, obviously, which is the case here well, not here, but in Liss, obviously now where the primary school is. I think it's a very, very key issue. And I know people say it doesn't work because it's not enforced. I just think it does work. I know that I personally, when I come into an area that's got a 24-hour speed limit, I drive slower. And if I drive slower, I'm sure a number of other people do as well. So it really is a very important factor. And I urge everybody to support it as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Don. Nick?
I agree with Don.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
I find myself in the surprising position of actually dissenting from many of these views. I do support the wider use of 20-mile-an-hour limits. What I find difficult to support is the motion which has been put forward by the campaign, which effectively is saying you replace 30-mile-an-hour limits with 20-mile-an-hour limit. Because in that case, I really don't see that you'll get a situation where people will conform to that. And I suspect he would very quickly fall into contempt. And I would much rather see 20-mile-an-hour limits applied to very specific points, like outside schools and so on, such as Don was arguing for. I do not like the motion, though, that has been put forward by this campaign.
Okay. So I think, Howard.
Yes. As a parish council, for a number of years, we've been trying to get part of the village down to 20 miles per hour. And we've been balked by the county council, whose decision was that we only allow 20-mile-per-hour speed limits where it's physically impossible to drive faster, which seems to be a bit self-repeating. There is some comment in this letter that we've had from Charles Coburn, that if you've got a 20-mile-per-hour one rather than a 30, even if people don't keep to 20 mile per hour, it will tend to slow them down. I mean, I noticed going through Selborne, I always try and keep to the 20, and it's quite a busy road, and I expect to have a queue behind me, and I don't get a queue behind me. Perhaps I'm just lucky. So I think in spirit we should agree to this, and I think we should support it as much as we can, because the county council are in decision-making mode, and whilst we've got them in decision-making mode, we should drag them as far as possible into that. I don't agree with getting rid of the 30, because if you've got everything as 20, people will tend to ignore it much more. So I think we need to go as far as we can to actually support having 20 mile per hour limits in places like the village centre. we all know the difficulties can occur crossing roads there. So I think that would be an ideal thing. So I fully support the 20-mile-per-hour limit without supporting perhaps all the reasoning we've been sent.
Okay, I think then something like removed in the meeting. I accept I'm sort of in the minority, so that's no problem. That's fine. That's why we're here. So I think we write back to Mr. Cockburn saying that we are supportive of their campaign.
Yeah.
And I think the actual wording of a motion we can look at when we are back in a position when we're having full council meetings. So I don't think there's an immediate rush to do that. I'm sure if we do it next month or the month after, it's not going to make any real difference. So are we happy that we do that? Are we right saying we're happy to support the campaign and we decide on the actual wording when we have a motion?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any dissenting.
Are you happy for me to share that with Speedwatch?
Yes, I don't see why not. Yeah. Leanne, anything?
No, I just put my hand up to say that I agree with
All right. Okay.
Alan.
Thank you. Right. So we move on then to receive updates from the committees, because we'll take the formal committee minutes when we are back in person. So if I lead first with the planning one, since that's my remit, I guess the main thing I'm planning is just to talk for a moment about Rodder Farm and the application they had for an events license. This is the Christmas tree farm out on Farnham Road. They were granted a license, but in a way almost accepting our fallback position, because they've been given a license for a limited number of activities. They have to give advance notice to us and to the District Council when they're going to hold these events, and the District Council will be putting officers with sound monitoring equipment at the requisite distance from the farm to check that they are abiding by the noise restrictions which were put upon them. So I think it's a reasonable compromise. The decision will be reviewed if they breach those noise limits, obviously, and there's also different restrictions been put in place for parking for when they have their other events and when they have their Christmas tree sales, because it was recognised that the two things are likely to be different. And I think for ourselves, we need to monitor what the feedback from the village is, and particularly with regard to noise, but also obviously with regard to parking. If people parking there proves to be a serious issue, but I'm hoping that things will actually progress in a way which I know there will be some people who aren't satisfied, but in a way that perhaps gets the best outcome that we can from that situation. So we don't yet know when the first event there's going to be, but obviously as soon as we're notified, we'll make sure that all councillors are made aware, and we can decide if we have any particular points to add after that happens. And I don't think there's anything else in planning that's been of any significant. Most of the applications have been quite minor applications. Something I will draw members' attention to, though, because I think it's important to get a view on whether you feel we should discuss this at planning and take a view or not. And I'd like to get the view where the whole council is here. There is a current application in from Petersfield Golf Club to erect a number of tourist cabins on land by the golf club, which is actually right on the edge of where they're going to put it. Is right on the edge of our parish. It's not in our parish. It's in Steep, but it is right on the border. It won't have any direct effect on the village, I don't think. But obviously, you know, with the South Downs in mind, particularly, and it has been called in by the National Park, so the National Park Club is taking a view on it with regard to the effect on the landscape. But I did just want to take a sort of sounding on whether you feel that it's something we should discuss as a planning committee for this and actually submit formally this parish council view on. Anybody got any thoughts? Nick?
I would like to suggest that we leave it to planning committee to make that decision. There's
okay.
So much we've got on the agenda tonight, and I'm incredibly hungry.
Okay. I agree with the sentiment. I'm not quite sure I agree with the reason why, but Roger.
I don't see why the planning committee can't just take a view as whether it's worth commenting on or not. I don't think it needs a view from us.
Right. Okay. No, that's fine. I'll Howard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree. I think the planning committee should look at it. Whether we decide to send something off or not is a decision for the planning committee.
Fine. Okay. Sarah, can you ask Lizzie to put that on the agenda for the planning committee? Thank you. Finance, Claire, do you have anything to update us on?
No, the finance committee has not met since the last time we had a meeting.
Okay, thank you. Nick, do you have anything on facilities to update us on?
You'll be sad to hear, yes, I have. Quite a lot of things have been happening. I think I do need to report them. The play equipment and West List, we have 5 potential contractors. Sarah has briefed most of them and will be briefing another. We hope to have their proposals in by the end of January, which is good. The goalposts for West List that we agreed to fund, the movable goalposts are now on order. Thank you, Sarah. The Mugger proposal at Newman Collard will be coming to Newman Collard trustees this Wednesday, and I think we can probably expect to have a proposal to us in time for the next project review committee. I've asked for it by the end of January. The crossover also, I think, are planning to put in a proposal for informal recreation facilities at West List, facilities for teenagers. We await that with interest. The adult equipment, Leanne asked at a previous meeting about consulting people. There is a consultation in progress through social media. We need to do it quickly to have it in time for the South Downs National Park Authority applications or application. That would be for equipment both at West List and at Newman Collard. Mill Road, unfortunately, we haven't heard back from all the utilities. Colleagues may recall that the problem is that there are pipes and possibly electrical wiring running under the Mill Road site, and the current owners, East Hampshire District Council, quite rightly are insisting that we check that all out before we make further progress. Lizzie is chasing the utilities. And finally, from me, just to say that I previously mentioned being in touch with George Hillier about the SANG, on the point that people don't know what a SANG is, and a lot of people don't know that it exists. Dog walkers seem to be rather better than others at knowing. He has agreed a form of words to publicise it, and as part of that, it will be called, instead of the Kippenses SANG, it will be called Hillier Fields. Final thing is the service level agreement with Newman Collard, in which I've asked Roger just to say a word.
Okay, thank you very much. Roger.
Well, very little to say. We have written to Dorothy Collard to ask her for her views as to what ought to appear in a new service level agreement. Also saying to her that let's the one we're in at the moment run itself out. So we're not talking about amending the existing one. We're talking about a new one that starts at the beginning of April this year. Unfortunately, she appears to have missed my first email on it. I'm not quite sure why. She's now seen it and replied. And I know that the trustees at the Newman Collard have a meeting this Wednesday where they will be discussing the issue.
Okay, thank you. Nick, is that it? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Andy, anything on highways?
I'm going to be very brief because I'm sure there's a lot of pressure and I don't want any heckling from the back about not getting through it. So only very quickly. So 2 things really. one, SDMP have confirmed that they've allocated all of the remaining Section 106 money for highways to us for gateways and school zone in phase 1. That's with the proviso that they get to sign off, see the final design for the gateways once we've gone through the public consultation. And the second linked thing to that is that the public consultation on the gateway locations and language for the sign about welcome to our village, we welcome careful drivers or not, Councillor Hargreaves, is out for consultation at the moment, which we're closing in due course and report back to the Highways Committee. So those are the 2 items.
Excellent, thanks, Andy. Roger, anything on Project Review Group?
No, we've not met since the last meeting of the council, so nothing to add.
Okay, and Leanne, anything on the review committee?
Yeah, we had a meeting on the 8th of December, and you should have the draft minutes in your packs. I won't go through the minutes unless there are any questions. We looked at 3 policies which are on the agenda on the next item. So I won't go through those, but if anybody's got any questions. Oh, the only thing to say that you might be interested in is, I know a number of people are interested in the grants policy, and that's one of the things that well, we looked at a previous meeting, and it is going to the Finance Committee at the end of this month, hopefully, if the agenda still allows, before it, for looking again at the Finance Committee, and for those people who aren't on the review committee, and then to go to a full council meeting for approval.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. So that then brings us to item 11, which is you again, Leanne, which is the revised policies on filming, audio recording, photographing and reporting of council meetings, training and environmental policy.
Yeah, these were all revised and approved by the Policy Review Committee on the 8th of December. The first one, the policy on filming, I mean, there were just some very, very minor revisions, some of which just included moving or getting rid of a cover and putting some titles into capitals, that's all, and just ensuring that the title matched the title on the website. So that was all. And normally we would ask the council to note it, so I don't know what we do in these circumstances.
I think we'll just carry that noting forward to the next time we meet in person, Leanne.
Okay, and will you need the actual documents again?
No, I don't think so, because they've been circulated. So
okay, so that was the filming one, and then we did the training policy, which we looked at a bit more thoroughly, and we made a number of changes, particularly to the councillor training. We just made sure that it was current, because some of the stuff that we had on the old list we found wasn't being done or given out. Some of the stuff in the information packs wasn't correct, so we just made sure that it matched, and Lizzie did some work afterwards to some check-in, and we just made sure that we clarified what belonged to List Parish Council and what didn't by putting an LPC in front of our own stuff. So no questions? No. And the environmental policy, again, very minor changes again, just to smarten it up a bit and move a few commas. But basically it's very much the same as it was, just we may have changed 1 or 2 words that we felt were not appropriate. For example, 2.5.7, encourage suppliers to improve their environmental performance rather than raise it. Just little things like that to make it read better.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for that, Leanne. I'm not seeing any hands, so I think we're okay. Item 12 has been withdrawn, as I understand it, Leanne. Leanne?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we also looked at our terms of reference, and unfortunately, what happened when I looked at the stuff tonight, the unrevised terms of reference has actually been put in the pack instead of the amended.
Okay.
So I think we'll leave that till next time.
Yeah. Okay.
When we meet, and I'll make sure that the revised one is actually put in.
Excellent. Thanks, Leanne. Appreciate that.
Could I point out that actually, although it's been withdrawn, the item refers to the project review group, not to Leanne's.
Oh, apologies. It should say review group, so it's wrong on the agenda as well. Okay.
Oh,
so
no,
every way you look at it, it doesn't go ahead.
It is not going ahead. No. Okay. So item 13, matters to report. Does anyone have anything? If they do, please can you raise your hand rather than me going around everybody. I'm not. Oh, Don.
Yeah, a simple one. Remember at the last meeting, Keith, I said what was happening to the community partnership meetings, and you I think said that you thought they were going to start again, and you or Sarah was going to look into it. Anyway, it was a subject that came up at this meeting that I had in Liphook with 3 police officers, and basically they had heard of nothing about bringing them forward, but thought they should happen.
All right. Okay.
I think they were very, very good meetings.
They were
historically, and a lot of the problems, of course, are exactly the same. We're just different people across the area, and it saves a lot of time to compare notes and give the police instructions as you will.
Agreed. Okay, Don. I will take that away and try and find out what the timetable is, because I know there was talk internally of bringing them back, but I'm not sure what's happened then. So I will.
Even if they were Zoom meetings, I'd be quite happy if they were Zoom meetings.
Well, yes, yeah, they could well be Zoom meetings actually, because yeah. Okay, I would take that one away and come back on that. Nick.
Sorry to add, but just thought I ought to report on the LPC Jubilee Celebrations, as they're going to be called, based on a meeting of the steering group on Friday. The key pillars so far will be in line with government guidance to hold a big Jubilee lunch on the Sunday, on the 4-day bank holiday, to kick off on the Thursday with obviously the lighting of the beacon as required again by HMG, to set aside lunchtime and afternoon on the Saturday for people who want to organise street parties. We noted that we probably couldn't close all the roads in this, and we're going to offer the different open space venues, Liss Forest Rec, Newman Collard playing fields for those who want to have a street party but not in their street. We have Karen Feeney is in charge of communications and has set up a Facebook page which we're advertising through all the other local social media and also on notice boards. Claire is in charge of coordination. Thank you enormously, Claire, and has already been encouraged by Dorothy to help her with a funding application to the Big Lottery Fund for a Liss Jubilee mugger, which of course is the mugger which we just talked about a few minutes ago. But I think it's going to be very productive. The Reverend Chris is already in touch with Claire with great ideas. I'm sure Claire could say more if there was time, but the only thing I do feel is we probably, the sooner we have a project officer, so it isn't, you know, we're not totally reliant on councillors, the better.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Claire, do you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I think Nick's done a very succinct summation, but Jenny wants to say something.
Jenny.
Thanks, Claire.
Sorry, it's very difficult for me trying to keep a watch on
It's
everybody.
fine, it's not a problem at all. It was just a quick question, actually. I've been asked by a couple of people on school runs, if people do want to do things like street parties, etc., how do they go about doing that? Where do they find that information on what, if they're, you know, I live on a little closed street, I presume we could just do that, but not everybody else can. So if someone did want to do that, how do they do that?
It's a very good question. And I think it's going to be a mix of people who live on little streets who can do it. And I believe the guidance is going to be that there won't be any need for any formal road closures. You just do it quietly and don't get in anyone's way. But there will be certain arterial roads that you just can't do that on. And that's why we're looking at making some public spaces available for a more communal affair.
Lovely, thank you. Like I say, it's just a couple of people had asked on the, if they wanted to do that, do they have to ask permission or?
Yeah, you and I are going to be in touch in the next day or so, because I have something I want to ask you.
How exciting. I look forward to it, thanks.
I think District Council sent out something about street parties recently.
Didn't they?
I don't know about that, Keith.
Yeah, they did. I can't remember what it said. I've got to be honest off the top of my head, but I will look into that, because obviously it's something that we need to do. I mean, personally, I've got to say, I've been thinking about this. I actually think it would be quite nice if we tried to encourage roads to have their party on, let's say, Newman Tollard, because I just think it would be nice to have people with tables at where their road, but, you know, actually show the community effect of everybody that was dead. But that's just me, maybe. Maybe I just fancy being able to go around as many tables as possible to sample different things for each. But anyway,
I think people are, just to follow that, I think the main thing for people is that I think they're not sure what they're allowed to do, and I think that's more. You know, if you're allowed to just rock up a Newman Carlisle with a picnic, yeah, cool. But you know, I think people are quite wary of breaking rules.
I'm sure that's something that between us we can sort out. Nick.
Thank you.
Could I just ask Sarah to circulate the link to the dedicated Facebook page to councillors, so we can all see exactly what's been said.
Yeah.
The other, we're trying to, in order to keep sort of some semblance of coordination, to encourage people to actually go to that Facebook page, but we're putting little signals or signposts on all the other social media outlets.
Yeah, it's been hinted, but not yet formally confirmed, but it's been hinted towards me that with my role of being now chair of the Town and Parish Council liaison panel at the District Council, that I may find falling under my wing, trying to sort of at least form a central diary of what everyone is doing. I'm pushing back on that idea because I suspect it's going to be rather like herding kittens, but anyway, we shall see. But anyway, thank you for that. I think that's all really positive. So we now move on at last to item 14, the councillor to option. So I'm going to ask Mr. Petts to leave. So thank you very much for your attendance, Mr. Petts.
Thank you very much for the option of being able to do that. Been an interesting conversation. Clearly you have some challenges ahead, but from what you've already achieved in the past, I'm sure you'll all rise to the occasion anyway.
Thank you very much. It's appreciated, I'm sure.